So how did the Huskers respond to the gut punch? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down Nebraska football. The Huskers go on the road to take on Northwestern, and the Wildcats limping along a bit themselves. We've got Greg Peterson on the line from Huskers Online. And Greg, how you doing today?
Doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing well. And looking forward to a Big Ten Western Division matchup. We haven't had too many. But it's right about the time that we're going to see all these teams that we need to find out about going head to head. And this is one of those games, even though you got the win against Illinois in terms of contending teams, this would be one that we would look forward to in terms of Northwestern, maybe not necessarily contending this year because they're off to a rocky start, but this has been a team that's been in contention in the Big Ten Western Division and showed some life against Wisconsin, some fight against the Badgers. On the Nebraska side, are you a bit shocked at what happened Saturday night?
Not really. Maybe just with the scale that it happened in and how quick it happens. But, I thought Ohio State would win the game by 28 points. I was a little bit off on that one. It turned out to be 41. But, yeah, I mean – the first Adrian Martinez interception, you could just feel that the game was over after that. I think it was 24-0 at that point in the second quarter, and I shut it down. I sent both cameras upstairs and said this isn't worth it anymore. So I mean, the weekend got off to a great start around Lincoln. College game day here, and they announced new facilities that are going to be ready here in 3 years, and just the atmosphere going into the game, and then kickoff happened, and that was about it. But I got to give Husker fans credit; they stuck around for almost that whole game. I figured they'd all leave at halftime, but there was still a pretty decent crowd there right up to the end of the game. But just didn't look good on the field for Nebraska, not at all. And to say Ohio State's probably one of the best teams I've ever seen play in all my years. They're good.
Well, it's definitely a hearty bunch there in Lincoln rooting for the Big Red. So that doesn't surprise me there. But to sit through that is going to another level. And maybe you've answered my next question about Ohio State being that good or Nebraska really needing to work on things. Certainly, this shows that they have a lot to work on to get to a place of competing for a Big Ten championship seriously. Maybe they can still win the West. Who knows? Those games have yet to be played. But do you take a lot from it of Nebraska needing to fix a ton? Or, again, I think you answered my question to a certain extent before I asked it, if Ohio State's really just that good.
Well, there's no question Ohio State is that good, but it really shows that, Nebraska, they're just not there yet with their talent level. Scott Frost only had 2 recruiting classes. So, it just shows that it's going to take some time. And I know Husker fans don't like to hear that, but you need to get 4 or 5 good recruiting classes in there to compete against a team like Ohio State right now. You mentioned it, the West is still up for grabs. I mean, Wisconsin looks pretty darn good too, but Nebraska can still win the West and actually have to play Ohio State again. So I don't know what that would look like in Indianapolis, but scary. But no, they are good. They are a good team.
We got Greg Peterson on the line from Husker Online, so please join him and the rest of the crew there covering Nebraska football. We talk to Huskers on a regular basis with a date at Northwestern, and regardless of the 48-7 score, it's a situation in which Nebraska's got a win under its belt in the Big Ten Western Division now that they face another foe that they're somewhat expected to win, but it's on the road, and that's been a tricky spot for the Huskers in the last year and a half. And I think you make a great point, Greg, in regards to, yes, the hype is real. The expectations were high. Everybody's excited about Scott Frost coming to town a year and a half ago. Took the 4-8 into consideration, but the team played so much better down the stretch and just ready for this thing to fire on all cylinders. Well, the reality is it's a hard business. And, there's a team on the other side, and they're not that, that they've got scholarship athletes too, and they're trying to beat you. You're not walking into an insurance or accounting office and basically you do your job and nobody's stopping you from doing your job. Somebody wins and somebody loses and somebody succeeds and somebody fails. And to take that leap in one of the best conferences in college football, it takes some work and it's going to take some time. Maybe we should allow the guy to build a program.
Absolutely. And I thought it was funny Monday in Scott Frost's Monday press conference. Somebody asked him if this job was harder than he thought it was going to be, which I thought was a pretty funny question. And, he quite frankly, he said no. I mean, he knew it was going to take time. He knew what he was getting into. And, there's no miracle fix. You got to get your guys in here. You got to, you got to roll the dice a little bit and you got to get lucky sometimes. But, there's a long way to go. It's not to say that they're a bad team. They're not a bad team. They just ran into a really good team and exploited their weaknesses. You just can't turn the ball over, number one. Adrian Martinez, 3 interceptions in the first half is just – you can't do that against a top 5 team, a top 3 team. You just can't. And, Scott Frost has handled it all the right way. He's not worried about it. There's always going to be growing pains. And I think offensive coordinator Troy Walters said it best yesterday that this is a get back week. This week they're getting back to where they were. They put Ohio State in the rearview mirror, and now it's time to play some real football. And with Northwestern coming to town here Saturday, I think they've got a real good chance to get back on track where they should be right now. As long as they don't turn the ball over, because Northwestern doesn't want to they're not going to turn the ball over very often. So they're not going to beat themselves, and this is always a very tight ball game between these two teams. So it is a get back week, I think, and it should see some favorable results come Saturday.
I was pretty secure in Ohio State's offense having success against Nebraska. What I wanted to see going into that game was all that Nebraska skill position talent on offense against the Ohio State defense, a defense that was ranked in the top 10 in the nation 3 consecutive years, then had a huge drop off last year. And they seem to have moved past that in regards to letting their athletes loose. But I wanted to see them against the best playmakers that they had seen, meaning Ohio State against Nebraska's playmakers this year, and seeing how that turned out. And any concern there that those guys weren't able to get loose much? Or do you think it was an offensive line issue with Ohio State's defensive front being one of the best in the nation?
No, I think there's genuine concern there. J.D. Spielman had 1 catch. That you can't let that happen. He's got to touch the ball a lot. The rest of the guys, Wandale Robinson, he couldn't even get loose. Dedrick Mills couldn't get loose. Mo Washington just can't seem to finish a game. He gets little bumps and bruises during these games, and he can't finish. Those are some of the guys that you're looking to get loose, and Ohio State just shut the whole thing down. Like I said, I mentioned the turnovers didn't help any. You can't spot that team that many points, but Scott Frost even had to pull out the old wing T I formation, some old school Nebraska stuff, and that's the only time they moved the ball. Sorry about that, but there was Ohio State's defense was just giving them fits the whole time, and just never could get going. And I think there's real concern there. We're going to have to see what they're going to do now against another good team. A lot different defense that they're going to play this week. But, that's one thing that they've all been mentioning, that, they've got to get their playmakers, the ball in the hands of their playmakers, and they got to do it often, early and often.
We're joined by Greg Peterson from Husker Online, talking Nebraska football off Ohio State's 48-7 win, but looking forward to Northwestern with a win under its belt against Illinois in the Big Ten. So very much in play in the Big Ten Western Division. So, yeah, the Northwestern, I watched the Wildcats play Wisconsin, and it looked like they were going to get run out of the building in the first quarter. But they held their own. they have all sorts of struggles trying to find big plays on offense. They just don't have those kind of players. So Nebraska is not going to see what they saw against Ohio State. But to your point, even though Northwestern's defensive front isn't as talented as Ohio State's, they held Jonathan Taylor in check. They rushed the quarterback. They got them back into the game. And if Pat Fitzgerald wouldn't have inexplicably been going for 2-point conversions, I didn't understand that. It could have gotten really scary because this Northwestern bunch, like you say, and we talked about them in the offseason, they don't give up. Yeah. They're tough. They're so smart. They're tough. They're not the most talented, but they won't give up. And they were down 24-3. And like that, it was 24-15. Should have been 24-17. And they hung in the game because they don't give up.
They never do, and they know that coming into it. They know they're not the most talented team out there, and I think they play to the advantage of that. They're going to come. They're going to shorten the game up on offense, limit Nebraska's touches, and like I said, they're just not going to make mistakes, and they scrap you to death. So, Pat Fitzgerald teams, that's what they do, and the history of this series. I don't care who's favored to win the game. I think the spread just dropped to 7 today, if I'm not mistaken. This game always comes down to a touchdown, always. And Nebraska is going to have to, like I said, they're going to have to hold on to the ball. They've got to limit these mistakes. The defense is going to have to stop the run game. They're going to have to prepare for 2 quarterbacks, and it's always, this is going to be, I think it's going to be a knockdown, drag out game, just like it usually is. So prepare for a game like that Wisconsin game last week. I didn't get a chance to see that game, but I see this game to be like a 24-23 type ball game. Unless Nebraska can really get their playmakers loose, and like I said, often and early, this game's going to come right down to the wire.
So, Greg, what would be the one thing that you would improve on Nebraska? If you could have control over anything, what would you like to see, whether it's a player, a unit, whatever it is, an aspect of the game that needs to improve?
Well, I think it's the quarterback play right now. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. We're just not seeing the Adrian Martinez that we expected to see out there, especially with his decision-making. Has been a little bit sketchy here at times. And time after time, the ball's getting turned over. Nebraska's getting themselves in a hole. You saw it at Illinois. They're constantly trying to dig out of a 14-point deficit, and you get out of rhythm that way. They just need to start connecting. They got to get, the ball in the hands of Spielman, Wan'Dale Robinson, Maurice Washington, and just let these guys go. Adrian's just got to take care of this ball. And I don't know if it's a mental thing with him right now, because it's not his athleticism, that's for sure, because he still is a pretty spectacular player. But it's just hard when you're trailing by 14, 21 points every game. So that would be my biggest take right now.
All right. We've got all the big Week 6 matchup previews right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, including Nebraska and Northwestern. Should be a good one. Greg Peterson on the line from Husker Online. Please join him and the rest of the staff right there. Greg, we appreciate you stopping by as always.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Mark. We'll talk to you soon.